Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Coaching Outdoors podcast. Anna and I are together again, which is wonderful, up here in Bonnie, Scotland. And today we are joined by Penelope. And I will ask Penelope to introduce herself, and also where in the world are you? So for people who can't see the screen, give us a little bit of a description about where you are.
Yeah, thank you both. It's just such a delight to be invited to here. Actually, I will use a Maori, I'm a New Zealander, pepeha, about where landmarks and descendants, so sort of using that inspiration. So landmarks, I come from an island, New Zealand, and I'm on an island in Spain, Mallorca, and you can't see it, but there's a big beautiful mountain behind me. It's kind of a nice metaphor for that, actually, even if you can't see it, it's there, Galazzo. And I'm, like I say, a New Zealander, but I came over to Europe 20 years ago, and I've got Scottish descendants and lived in Great Britain and Italy and now here. And so I'm Penelope Mavor or Penny, either one that's either flexible, and I'm a leadership and consultant. And I created an organization or my own thing, Earth Converse, which is helping leaders best serve people and planet.
And thank you for that introduction, and I am loving the international flavour that we've got today, and actually throughout series 4 it just seems to have almost kind of crept in slightly unintentionally. And Earth Converse as well. We'll just kind of take a pause on that, but really keen to kind of dive into that later. So kickstarting as we always do with our question, which we invite every guest just to recall their earliest memory of being outdoors. And then what is it about being outside that you love so much?
Yeah, and like everyone, I love this question. And I really think that if everybody was asked that would serve the world, wouldn't they? They would reconnect with that memory and that love. And I'm not so good at childhood memories, to be quite honest. But I have, I'm a daughter of a vet. So lots of animals and horses, and being outdoors, you know, so that's in the trees and the rivers. It's just sort of that sort of environment where we grew up. But we did have a bone cave. So my sister and I had a bone cave literally from the dead animals that Dad didn't save. And so we would invite them into our little forest and hang them up. So a lot of people obviously would get scared, but I do recall that now, that I am kind of fascinated with how nature helps us with death and dying as well. So might get into that too. But I think with the outdoors, I mean, you know, I always, wherever I've been in the world, I've gone out like every day, like it's part of, I have to do that. And now I understand that's really part of my well-being, but it's become like a deepening intimacy and expansiveness. Like, so it's my guide, it's my source, it's my inspiration, it's my friend, it's just like kind of everything to me, and it's kind of my career as well. So yeah.
I said my guide, my source, my inspiration. I think we've got a great soundbite going.
Absolutely. That's the tagline for your podcast.
Let's do that.
And a cave of bones as well. Wow, that's definitely slightly different from what we've had so far, though. You know, each and every memory is just really, really powerful.
Yeah.
And then almost kind of fast forwarding slightly from clearly your earliest memory to, you know, working as a coach and then working within the outdoors and with nature. What was it that, I know, started this journey? Just having an insight into your backstory of how everything kind of came together would be great.
Yeah, I studied sustainability. You know, New Zealand was the first to adopt the Rio Convention, so I've been always interested in that social, economic, environmental thing. Did, you know, even as a young teenager, like the local post office closed down, and I saw the impact on our community and just things like that. So I studied that, and then have just been in terms of whether that be in regional government, and so increasingly like increasingly into that route, really. So it became in terms of leadership, and so helping leaders have those conversations around that integration, around that wholeness. And then, of course, a parallel with that is my own journey where, you know, something gets you onto the meditation cushion or the yoga mat, doesn't it? And so therefore, from that mindfulness, really feeling that oneness, and then, you know, being in tune with my own heart, and it sort of, and then naturally went into nature-based wisdom. And I'm really grateful for the likes of Christiane, that she mentioned it, like Bill Plotkin's work, or Ananas Valley, and particularly who I've worked with, it's the School of Lost Borders. So through that, it's just sort of, yeah, once again, this deepening. And so alongside that, I've become more brave. And I think it was Liz that said, where coaches are becoming more vocal about what they stand for. And, you know, so I don't want sort of like, I can, you know, do that mainstream leadership thing. But I really want to say what I really feel. And I mean, I've worked with lovely organizations like Common Purpose, which was, you know, bringing public, private and voluntary sectors together and saying that in your leadership, you've got, you know, you've got a responsibility for your organization, but also society. So with the Common Purpose method, the environment is your classroom. So we would go out, whether it be this, I worked in Brighton, you know, South Downs, or you going into the banks, or you're going into the homeless shelters, you know. So I think this is, you got to feel it. So it's the same with nature, isn't it? If you're really doing that. I mean, I worked with the Impact International, which is an outdoor based in Lakes District. And so, you know, when you take leaders out into the nature, you out to the outdoors, it's impossible to not go there. So it just flowed in that way.
And that part of your answer just actually flows really nicely into the next question we have for you, because we would love to know more about, you know, the coaching either individually or in those leadership programs, and how the outdoors helps you to support that element of the coaching, either on the programs or individually, and with sort of specific reference to mirroring and metaphor, and the kind of, how is it that nature enables or affords us to have those conversations and bring mirroring and metaphor into those conversations.
Yeah, and I love the conversations you've had with other people around this, you know. I just think this is the deepening. And I mean, nature, you know, we are, you know, it's said before, we are nature. Actually on that, I might do a quote. There was a quote from Aubrey Marcos. Do you know, have you come across his work? Mm-hmm. I'll recommend the podcast. Yeah. So look, he goes, and it was only yesterday, saying you are Earth. You are composed of 84 minerals, 23 elements, and 8 gallons of water. It's American. Spread across 38 trillion cells. And he goes, you have been built up from nothing by the spare parts of the earth you have consumed, according to a set of instructions hidden in a double helix and small enough to be carried by a sperm. You are recycled butterflies, plants, rocks, streams, firewood, wolf fur, and shark teeth, broken down to their smallest parts and rebuilt into our planet's most complex living thing. You are not living on Earth, you are Earth. And I thought that was really lovely. So, I mean, that's where we start, you know, like to know who you are, and that outdoors naturally, you know, that evokes that in you, doesn't it? So as all, you know, you can, of course, I can, you know, we can stay in a room and be enlightened. I mean, there's many people in the world's history that have done that, but doing it in outdoors is just such a much more natural, and it's our home. And I think it's like sort of pure source, isn't it? And so we are, it's, nature's not just a metaphor, it's a living being. So to help people see the aliveness in it, to reconnect with those emotions and feelings and really feel, and I think this is where you know, bodied wisdom or tuning into your own intuition or somatic awareness helps, because you get more in tune and feeling you know, the breeze on your hair or the heat on your, you know, on the face or something. So so there's that there, but the metaphor, deepening the metaphor, is really interesting, because I think that we're meaning makers, aren't we? You know, it's a double meaning universe. That hill is a hill, but it's also as a symbol, you know, for striving, or it's actually, for me, it's actually part of the nest that we live in, you know. So it's a side of the nest for me, so I feel quite contained. Or you know, or the trees, the you know, where they are a symbolism of change for me as I look through the seasons. So I think, yeah, there's an aliveness, there's a metaphor, and then there's a deepening of the metaphor where, and I was interested in actually your one, Alex, where you said the whale. I think it was amazing. You looked out the window and saw a whale. I mean, who does that? I mean, really, you know. And so there's an awe and evokiness, and I read your article about sort of how to recreate that feeling, you know, and that can be accessed. So that's really powerful, that you remember seeing it, you remember it is, and so that's the power of a metaphor anyway. But to deepen that, what is the whale spirit to you? You know, what is the whale? So I've done this with coachees. Like, one would tell, I said, well, you know, who have you met on your way, on your travels? You know, and it might be it was a badger or a squirrel. And the squirrel, and it's sort of like, well, what are the qualities of the squirrel? What do you see in the squirrel? What, you know, go and do your own research about the symbolism. You can Google it and see if it's true for you. So therefore it becomes, you know, like, what would be the whale to you in terms of rebirth and creation? And, you know, so I think there's a metaphor in the moment where you can work with, and then there's a deepening of that. And how does it live in you in your day-to-day life? I feel like I've talked a lot.
And you know, just before we get on to that, as soon as you mentioned that, because I wasn't expecting you to, I instantly remembered it, and it sent a little wave of endorphins into my brain, because I have that, it's that deepening of that metaphor, and you're absolutely right, because it was such a lovely experience, and it had such a profound impact on me on the day. And I hadn't thought about it for a long time, actually, and then you just mentioned it, and it's just released lovely happy hormones in my body. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it could be your soul animal.
I think it probably, they are one of my soul animals, I have to say. I do love them.
And it's that kind of that connection, that anchoring, and then what do you bring back? And it, just hearing you talk remind me of a session I had with a client. We were down by the canal and there was a heron, and for him, I didn't even see the heron. And at the end of the session, it was like, okay, so what are you taking away from the session? And he was like, oh, it's the heron. What heron? And he's, I want to be like the heron. I want to be calm. I want to be poised. I want to go into the board meeting next time and just be really still and poised and confident. And that for him was like a talisman that he then carried with him as he went in. And that's how to be the heron in his communication. There's been a lot of conflict and a lot of anger and resentment in the boardroom. The conversations have been quite heated. But for him to kind of go in and embrace this, it really gave him something to ground and to be rooted with.
Beautiful. And he can draw, keep that alive. We're drawing it, or keep a photo of a heron, or if you're lucky enough, get the feather, just all sorts of the things that you can sort of just really lives in you. I think that's really important.
And ultimately, as we navigate change, and this is almost sliding into our next area, which we'd like to dive into, is change. And, very much as we move through our lives and our works, the pace of change seems to be getting increasingly faster. And it's something that we need to learn to position ourselves within. And how have you found that nature has supported people through their endeavours to do this? And what particularly caught my attention was the use of medicine wheels and how you kind of weave that in. So tell us more.
I sort of, once again, it's a sort of and a few other guests have said it, and it's like how bringing that alive. I love what Joe said in terms of the 4 directions, and Christiana sort of touched on it, didn't with the medicine wheels. And I mean, this is ancient. I mean, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here, and particularly my work with the School of Lost Borders and their elders. So it's a nature-based model of change. And now I see it sort of everywhere. I heard the interview with Jill Bolt Taylor, the neurosurgeon. She's got a book out called Whole Brain, and looking at the 4 parts. Or now I even see the action, adult learning cycle. It's sort of like, actually, no, that's the 4 directions or the medicine wheel. So I think it's really, it invites change. I mean, you can, if you just sit and observe nature, you realize there are 4 seasons, or generally, or that there's a living and dying. So there's nature invites us to do that. And if you can, people know this. I mean, my Vipassana meditation, like where you change. I mean, you're not born like this. We went through some changes, so, but I think to sort of sit and watch that observe your bodily sensations change and tune into that is actually a starting point. So I think that actually, to do nature-based work without some sort of sensitivity around that and silence around that, and is a bit of a challenge. But I think, starting that and then tuning into what you notice around the seasons. So if I did the medicine wheel, we'd start in the south. Like the south is, I mean, it's a medicine wheel is, it's all different levels, isn't it? Like it's like a clock where you have a little clock. It could be, we could go round the medicine wheel in this conversation, in this one moment, or it could be a day, or it could be a lifetime or a project. So we're seeing that. So the south is, it's the child, the youthfulness, the innocence. So you can also, as a coach, invite that, like the south is like midday. So what does midday evoke in you? It's the warm or the sensations, or there's a question like you could ask, like, what is innocence to you? So there's sort of like questions and locations and times of day that can evoke these different parts of the wheel. So then, and the wheel itself in terms of nature is that you have to move on. The child has to become a teenager generally, if it's lucky. I know that some haven't, but we are pushed out. So there's something that will move us on. And also, how do we create that movement ourselves when we need to? So in medicine terms, so there's sort of layers. There's the teenage side, or it's about looking into your shadow. It's the west. It's the autumn. You could, like, for example, that's where late afternoon can invoke things in you around the west. It can be your shadow, your wound. So you may want to, like, intentionally go and near a tree, or go out to nature and see a wound. It could be a carcass, a damaged tree or something that evokes that in you. So once again, just the time, place, questions can evoke that. And then the teenager at some point has to grow up, and so that's the north. That would be the person that can plan. It's very much about family love and creating action, or being able to store up for the winter. Like it's winter. It's you have to do some hard graft. We spend most of our adult life in this winter northern doing thing. But once again, like, do you want to, you can ask your coaches, to go out in the middle of the night and see what evokes in that, the coldness of the night, and see what you want to do. And then the east, is the elder, or it can be the spring, it can be in other terms, it's the trickster, it's the sage, and then so where you're invited, you can in a dawn walk, what does the sense of oneness, or what's that? So, and then say at some point there's a dying in that, and and you come around and circle around back to spring or the child. So I guess it's sort of like you're always moving, and if you observe nature, if you observe a day in its and its rhythms or a season, you'll see the change, and nature's inviting you to go into that change. Yeah.
And that's such a powerful image, and the way you've described them, and I was listening and hearing so many parallels to what, as you said, what Joe was saying with the men's group and the different points of the sort of compass with that. And as I've mentioned in a couple of the podcasts, I have kind of pagan connections, and to me it's very much about the north, south, east, west, the times of the year, the seasons, and it once you start to tune into that and notice it around you, you feel the power of nature in its different forms throughout the year as well. And obviously you're looking over a lovely mountain there, as I've got a mountain opposite, or in Scottish terms it's actually a hill, but it's a mountain. And it's the same as you. I watch the trees throughout the year changing. So some of them shed their leaves, some of them don't. And I got quite excited the other day because all of the ancient oaks and the what I would call native trees had started to really flourish, and the colour had become a different colour. It was suddenly become this rich, gorgeous green, which it hasn't been for the last few months through winter. So I once you start observing that, your eyes bring you to it, and it's like, when I look out the window, I notice it because my brain's wanting to see it and waiting for it to happen. So I think it's a lovely, lovely metaphor, and a way of helping, as you said, your clients to see change in a different way, and that change happens. It's just how do we respond to it? And I think one of the things that we're really interested in hearing about, with your background in sustainability, one of the things that seems to have kind of come to the fore quite in relatively recent years, especially in the world of coaching, is this idea of sustainability, environmental sustainability. And you have things like the Climate Coaching Action Day happening yearly now, and actual weeks dedicated to, as coaches, how are we helping to bring this important topic of sustainability and environmentalism into the world of coaching. And obviously we're coaching outdoors, so it's literally all around us. You can't help but see it. So how do you marry up your background in sustainability with your outdoor coaching, and do you find that your clients are interested in talking about sustainability, being that they are in that outdoor environment?
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, I think Diana said, like some of the clients come and they know it's for a typical leadership program or something like that, where but I think it's like where you are, and going back to what Liz said about the I call myself Earth Converse, so that there's sort of an expectation that you are interested to have that dialogue, and I think I want to help that. I think in terms of, it's really important, well, for me, is like that line of sight. So as us individuals, what is my line of sight to my family, to my community, to the world, or myself as a leader, the team, the organization, the world? It's really important for me to see that, zoom out and zoom back in. And so I have a belief and an approach around that. So if somebody's, if somebody feels too zoomed in, or talk about Zoom, and I'll do questions to actually help them, want them to encourage them, leading questions in many respects, isn't it? I do, it's an open question, but I do have an agenda, because I believe that will serve, that will serve the bigger mission. So I think, so just that zoom in, zoom out is really helpful with those questions. I think being clear on your own intention. I think in terms of, like until you turned up, I didn't really call myself an outdoor coach. And in fact, I don't say that. It's sort of like, I want that actually nature, it's so part of it, like what Aubrey Marcus was saying, or it's just, I like to think of spectrums, it's from raw to processed, everything around us is that. And so if you're thinking about, whether it's thinking about, products, or what where did all these elements come from that made this computer or your engineering product? What about if you're talking with a marketing team, what is the impact on your team and globally? You know, what's the shadow side of what you're doing? Where are you incorporating, you know, where will you allowing for non-growth or decay or transformation? These are not the words that people sort of kind of like, but I know it's sort of a broadener, raising awareness and, you know, reconnecting with their own story of nature. And so once they do that, and particularly going outdoors naturally evokes that, you know, they change in that moment. Is that your experience?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this idea of, you know, if it's coaching outdoors or nature coaching, green coaching, eco coaching, you know, however we brand, you know, ourselves, that in itself is a journey that us as individual coaches work through, ultimately to convey our, you know, brand, position, philosophy, and part of that is also, you know, the name of our companies sometimes. And for you, Earth Converse, it's a beautiful name on your website. Where did this come from?
Oh, it came from taking, you know, I talk about taking it to the land, you know, and it's sort of my original, been out on my own since 2009 when I moved to Italy, and I called it quintessenza consulting, and so that's the essence. But you know, it just didn't sort of fit, and it was a conversation with with Mother Nature about really what I am to do and how I want to do. And I like this. I like that we're in conversation with things. And I mean, there's a lovely Wendell Berry going, you know, we've stopped that conversation, the greatest conversation we could have. We're not having it. Of course, indigenous cultures, that's part of that, but our Western world, we're not familiar with it. And so yet, you know, we talk to our pets or we look up to the sky and go, please, you know, like, so we naturally do it anyway. So once again, there's just sort of making it, I want to sort of mainstream it, that it's just the way we do things. Yeah. And I think, carry on.
And it really kind of just opens things up. And just for people who are listening in, having that time and space in a place to be open to that conversation, and just being really intuitive as to what comes up, and just it's that deep gut feeling that actually it just resonates deeply within you, and it just speaks volumes.
I really do. I mean, I've had friends, you know, or coaches get sort of going, oh no, that was just my ego talking. And it's sort of like, and is it like, there's a real suspending judgment, isn't there? My wise elder, Emerald North, she'll go, it's just all this engaging conversations with Earth is a slight turn of the head, you know, just seeing something slightly different. And it's like, and it's practicing that, you know, it's, if you sometimes you just jump to the first thing, or what's taking your attention, oh that bird is, and what's it saying? Well, it's telling me to be, you know, persistent or speak up. Well, it could be, you know, maybe it's like also just staying with it a little bit longer, being a little bit quieter. And like you say, Anna Maria, I mean, this is intuition. You know, if we can't listen to our own voice, you know, the birds and the bees have gotten, you know, and the rock has nothing to tell us, the wind, has it? If we can't really listen to that. So once again, we go internal, you know, we go look at ourselves and raise awareness.
And this idea of this conversation, and this depth and richness of conversation, when you're working with your clients, and this is kind of bringing in one of the topics that you kindly offered to us around loss and death. And how does that serve them? What comes out? And any, you know, case studies or examples would be amazing, just to kind of bring that richness to life.
And like the medicine wheel, you know, like death is here. Like I love that there was an onion saying, you know, death is, you know, holding consistent at 100%. You know, none of us are getting out here, you know, like, so but that's the thing, isn't it? Like you know, how there's different you know, other cultures have a much more wise or fluid, or, you know, I don't know what the word is, relationship with death. And So when we don't, so therefore it goes on to sort of either how we view control or how we view things. I did some work recently around VUCA, like volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environments. But actually, that's a military term, isn't it? That's a military term, came from the Afghanistan war. And now it's, of course, people go, no, that's my natural world. But actually, VUCA is mystery, isn't it? How can we talk about either mystery and sitting with that, or ambiguity, rather than control our way out of it with goal setting? Maybe sit with that, sit with that grief, sit with that feeling. So I think it serves, if we go into these sort of deeper things, these more uncomfortable things, and death is the ultimate discomfort, I guess, for some, is that by doing that and holding it with compassion and reverence and lightness, I think that helps everybody. So I did this course, I might even post it to you, it's called The Practice of Living and Dying with the School of Lost Borders. And it's like, we are going to die. So let's prepare ourselves in a practical way. So what can we do about either from wills to our own forgiveness work, and what conversations haven't we had? So that's really important. That's one. The second one is like, how do we support people that are dying? So anybody at any time in your organization or in your life is facing that. They're either supporting somebody dying, grieving from death, or so what's the question, how can we support them? So things like, what do you need? Quite often we're uncomfortable with that. And then the third bit is the symbolic. So what needs to die within me in order for me to really blossom? I mean, I think a lot of people, coaches, would use legacy. What's the legacy you want to have? But you can also just deepen that conversation. And also it relates to things like, wanting to letting go. What do we need to let go to evolve? And I think, so that's at an individual level. And then, of course, organizationally, this growth obsession is unnatural. It's impossible. So no wonder we're getting into the state we are. So to actually explicitly say what in your organization needs to die, what needs to decay, what needs to transform, what's your compost in this company or in your team? What is the compost? We can, so I invite people to, go out and sit with something that's dying. And by doing that, you see the life, is a rotting leaf dead, or is it most live and vibrant? And so you become in a more sort of, more fuller way of understanding death and decline and growth, which is also part of success. I've got a wise man said, Ray Hillis I've worked with, he said, quoting somebody else, but the death is the most important part of your life. So if a leader, if a coachee has that's going to change things. Yeah.
The way you're describing that, it also makes me think as well, so you can experience those things within nature, or use the nature metaphors, like you said, what's your compost? So you don't necessarily even have to be out in nature to understand those parallels between, as you said, living and dying consciously, making those choices. And I think that's one of the things where, having this understanding of the natural world and having that nature connectedness, you don't have to be outdoors to help it, to utilize it within a coaching conversation. If for whatever reason it can't be out, you can't be physically outdoors, the outdoors can still be within the conversation and still permeate through and provide that metaphor and that opportunity to talk in very different terms to the business world, but just find different ways of describing what you're trying to work through, or the challenges you're trying to resolve. And I just love that. What is your compost? That's going to be another very quotable one. What is your compost? Because I have a lot of compost, and now I'm going to try and work out what my loads of composts are.
There's richness in that. And before you just say it, because, and there's also a real, the nature world is the ultimate, like, place. I mean, with Vision Quest that I've gone on and that I've co-guided, where you're invited to, create that place where you're going to die. You die that night. And so you do a process. It's, from the death lodge. And it's amazing if you're sitting in your place where you want to die, who comes to you, just maybe either intentionally, I'm going to think about mom, dad did it, but actually it's incredible who will come. And so then you can leave that safely, knowing that you're alive, you're alive, and you can then go and have that conversation and deepen that, because in that moment it was real and it came, it's another reality. So you've got something to work with.
Yes, it is a wonderful way, and from a personal perspective, nature has helped me deal with a lot of grief in the not too recent past, and it is fascinating what you say about having anyone at any point in their life is dealing with death in some way, but as a Western culture especially, we try to avoid those conversations, and actually sort of bringing it to the surface and giving people a language to talk about it. It opens up the conversation, and it definitely helps mentally. So it's such it's one of those topics that, again, you wouldn't necessarily expect to be coming up, or might be avoided in a coaching conversation as well, but trying to open those conversations up, and nature really helps us to do that. So it's great. Thank you for the examples up there as well. We say this to a lot of you, probably. I know. We say this to a lot. We'd love to. We could just talk to you for hours and hours. But I think we've touched on some really great topics, and obviously we will highly recommend anyone who's listening to go and find your website, because it is lovely. I love the image on your website of you sort of peeking through the wood, through the bark of the tree. But before we kind of wrap up, what resources can you recommend to our listeners for getting out there and experiencing nature in a different way, or starting their kind of journey into the world of coaching outdoors? What kind of resources did you find useful yourself?
Lovely. And thank you for creating this resource rich. Really. So I really love it. For me, it started off with the meditation in terms of John Kabat-Zinn, Tara Brach, that, and then and Goenka, and all of that. In terms of and Christiane and a few have said about Bill Plotkin, or Meredith Little and Stephen Foster from the School of Lost Borders, all their work. So they're the main ones in terms of that deepening. I do know myself that I've now, Charles Eisenstein's podcast, or Aubrey Marcos, or, Be a Good Ancestor, or Bionese, or Neoterra. These are the I'm sort of more in these podcasts, just sort of like where they zoom out and zoom in. I'm really interested in this sort of, and also things that, plant medicines, where does that going to be in outdoor coaching, and things like that. There's a whole opening, I think, and we're willing to really go into a deepening of our consciousness and releasing our potential, and I think Mother Nature is really calling us to do that.
There's definitely some synchronicity going on here. So Joe and I went to a talk in Bath on psychedelics, psilocybin, a couple of weekends ago, by a professor from University College London, don't quote me, and he was showing a lot of research around how that supports and actually really improves nature connectedness. And I took a load of screenshots of his presentation. I was like,
wow.
Maybe we should get this guy on.
I've got goosebumps. It's a yes.
And the good thing is there's a lot of those around this area if you know where to look as well. So go foraging for our own.
But it's almost like we're just having to re-educate ourselves. It's almost like it feels as if you're kind of pushing the boundaries against the system which currently exists. So this is our heritage. It's been around for hundreds, thousands of years, and we're just having to kind of relearn it. And how does that sit with kind of current society and the world? Though I do think we're living in a really, really exciting period of time to see, advanced states of consciousness, and where can we go, and what does that bring?
Yeah,
So yeah, watch this space.
Watch this space. Lovely. Thank you both.
So yeah, Penny, thank you so much for coming on and being a part of Series 4. Absolute pleasure. And yeah, it would be great to have you back to continue the conversation at some point in the future. And would really just encourage our listeners to kind of check out the rest of the work that you're doing within this field. And wow, we've been just so many different places, and I think this idea around, you know, life and death and love and loss and grief and how we kind of face up to that as individuals. We've got a lot of work to do within that. So actually within the coaching space, we can provide that. And actually with nature as a part of us, how can we really have this conversation and bring that to flow? So thank you.
Thank you both. Great work.
And just to signpost the rest of our interviews with our guests who kindly come on and gift their time and their knowledge, their experience, we have got a back catalogue of treats for you to discover if you haven't so far. So do check out our website, coachingoutdoors.com, for some more interviews with an amazing set of guests. So that is us for today. It's a wrap. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are on this wonderful planet. So if you enjoyed what you've heard,
like it,
share across your network,
and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks so much in advance for your support.